Welcome to a Pneuma conversation, a place where the unseen becomes seen, a space where the silence become heard and where the rejected are accepted. Together we breathe. Together we remember that we are all remembered, we are all loved, and we all belong. These are the conversations that remind us what it means to be alive. Today we're in conversation with Annie Spence. Annie, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. It's this conversation's been a long time in the making. You and I have a mutual friend, Jason, who was on the podcast last year, and
Mhm.
and he's been trying to connect us, and it's finally happened, and
Yeah.
and it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure since
Love
the
that guy.
moment.
Love
I love
Jason.
that guy
Yeah,
too. So now I get to love you and have more people in my life, and so
likewise.
this is a treat. So Annie, what has shaped you into the life you are living now?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that's a broad question.
Okay.
And I think to summarize, I think from an early age, I found myself as, maybe kind of a sensitive person.
Mhm.
I remember kind of distinctly a moment in probably kindergarten or first grade. And
Okay.
this will make sense in a second. But did you
Yeah.
ever sing Puff the Magic Dragon in school when you
Yes.
were a kid, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is like a little song that all the kids sing in school, and I
Right.
remember sitting in music class and singing it and having a realization with the lyrics that this thing was kind of about like I guess there's drug references aside, but that this thing was really about like time and loss, and it's like, oh, this, like, having this realization as a really small kid, like, oh, this boy grows up and the scales fall off the dragon and he forgets, and
Yeah.
he
There's more
kind of,
going on than
there's more
just
going on. Yes, yeah, yeah. And that really he's like stepping away from this kind of childhood innocence into the adult world. And I remember being struck by that really small and sitting in class and like crying, and all the other kids in class being
Hmm.
like, what's wrong with her?
Oh my.
And that I think is really, although it's kind of corny in a way, I think that really was like a pivotal moment for me of awareness that, like, oh, I'm like feeling this thing in a way that maybe some of the people around me aren't. And I think I kind of continued to feel that way. And as somebody who has grown up in Kansas, like, people here are known to be really kind and really friendly. And so I think just growing up around people and feeling very social, but also maybe being from an early age sensitive to the way in which time and relationships and loss kind of shape our life, I think that's kind of led me probably to this point. And there's some more details in there probably, but that might be a good summary.
That's all right. That's cool. So, well, you and I talked a couple weeks ago at the timing of this recording, and so you really opened up and made yourself vulnerable, and but it was really neat to hear your story. And this is one of the reasons I created this podcast, to hear people's stories,
Absolutely.
not their ego, not what they're presenting, the
Or,
role they're
yeah,
presenting, and
yeah.
so I really appreciated hearing all that. It really it was there was a connection for me, and so there's one thing I'd like to point out, if you're okay with sharing it,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
just the school you were raised in, because you were raised with nuns, and you went to a Catholic school, and
Yeah, I well, not
that
not
was
nuns quite, but
okay. Okay.
thankfully, think I didn't get beat on the knuckles with rulers, thank goodness. But
Okay.
yeah, so I grew up here in Kansas and Manhattan,
Yeah.
and I went to a public grade school for several years and kind of started having, back to the first story, like pretty severe anxiety as a really young
Yeah.
kid. And
Yeah.
so my parents pulled me out of public school and thought that maybe smaller private school would be a little more appropriate. And so there's a Christian school in town. And I
Okay.
started going there in fourth grade and went there
That's right. That's right. My apologies. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
oh, no, you're okay. There is a Catholic school in town.
Okay.
Got a great basketball team.
That's
But,
right.
uh,
I've been
but
there. It's,
yeah, it's really beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But so I went to this Christian school for several years, and I think, growing up, I think, again, sensitive, right? Like, you're reading, here we are reading like the teachings of Christ and the teachings of Jesus, and this idea that we should love our neighbor and accept each other. And I remember really distinctly well, a couple of things happened. My fourth grade teacher's son was in the class with us, and I was very good friends with him. And over Thanksgiving break, His sister, who was going to school in Nebraska, came back for a visit and spent kind of our like class reading date with us. And Brianna was really beautiful and wonderful and kind to all of the kids. And then the week after that, she drove home to go back to college in Nebraska and hit black ice and passed away.
Mm,
So my fourth
mm,
grade year, I kind of watched these people of faith grieving, my teacher grieving her daughter and my friend grieving his sister. And then that summer, our kind of other close friend in our friend group, his mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And
okay.
the doctors at the time they didn't realize this until much later, but when they placed the port, they placed it incorrectly and they wound up kind of shooting a hole through her heart with radiation. And
Mm,
so that friend called me the summer before sixth grade, and you're maybe 11 or 12 at that time.
yeah.
And I remember my friend calling me and saying, answering the phone, my dad being like, "Hey, Annie, your friend Ian's calling you. It's kind of weird." And
Mm,
he said, "Hey, Annie, I just wanted to let you know my mom died." And I think as a small kid, that both of those moments were really pivotal. And my grandpa passed that same year. And so I spent a lot of my kind of early childhood in this Christian school surrounded by death and grieving people. And then in sixth grade, my teacher she'd been a missionary overseas and was very kind of like hardlined, like, "You kids don't understand how lucky you are." And she was a little more aggressive and a little more stringent. And I recall that was the year in Manhattan where an LGBT protection ordinance was proposed. And I
okay.
remember
Yes.
her, yeah, that was proposed and wound up repealed and then re-proposed and passed. But really, all that was, I think there was this interpretation of like additional or special rights for LGBT people. And really, all that ordinance was for, because up to that point, there was kind of no non-discrimination clauses at like a big national level. It was really just that if your landlord found out that you were a member of the community, or, say your employer, that they wouldn't be allowed to fire you or
Right.
kick you out of your living situation. So it was really about safety for the kind of humanity of these LGBT people. And I remember my sixth grade teacher presenting this as, like, "Oh, this means that we would have to hire these people and they're sinful and they're wrong and this is bad and it's extra
Right.
special rights." And I think at that time, being what I thought was the only gay kid in my class at the time, that was a really isolating experience. And I think that was probably my first kind of run up to this moment of like, okay, I'm hearing this thing that I'm not really a believer, but I think the message of Christ is really inspiring. And so it's like, okay, well,
Right.
gosh, our classroom verse is the fruit of the Spirit, and that's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And that's something I still remember and that I still think about and find inspiring as a non-believer. But the contrast between this thing that we were being told that we were supposed to do and this way that we were supposed to be, and then maybe some of these adults around me maybe not really demonstrating that, I think was a really pivotal kind of shaping experience in terms of how I thought about myself and how I thought about other people, and I think how I thought about also faith in certain ways. And so that was a really early shaping experience. And
Mhm.
shortly after that kind of sixth grade year, that was a really difficult year. And I had kind of looked at other school options as a kid, and I think my parents kind of felt not confident about homeschooling through middle school and high school, just in terms of academically. They were like, "We don't really know if we can make sure you prepared." And they both taught. My dad taught. My mom taught, and my dad was a construction worker. But they both taught me stuff for school, and I think that they just kind of wanted to make sure I got a good education, and so that's why they'd sent me to this private school. And the year that
Mhm.
I was going into seventh grade, the local USD 383 had a program for juniors and seniors of high school that they could do their classes online. And this was mostly developed for, there's like kids in rural areas that work on farms and things like that, where maybe there's the local high school is really far away, or there's not necessarily a big local high school. And so I found that program, and the year that I was going into seventh grade was the first year that they opened it up for middle schoolers. And so I came home and said, "Hey, mom and dad, like, I don't really know if this Christian school environment thing is for me." And my
Right.
parents weren't super religious. That wasn't really why they sent me there. And so they said, "Yeah, sure, like, let's try this online school thing." And so I wound up doing online school for all of middle school and high school. And during that time, I was really interested in drawing really out throughout all of grade school. And so I thought I was going to be a graphic novel illustrator. And at
Okay.
about 12 or so, I got all these books and all these anatomy references and thought, "Oh my gosh, this stuff is actually really cool." And so I found weightlifting at that time. And I think doing the
Okay.
online school and getting into weightlifting at 12 has kind of shaped really the rest of my
Yeah.
life, and how I spend my time now, and really how I,
Well, you've said a lot there. So let's
yeah.
just take a minute and breathe, as I like to say. So, um, uh, I wanna ask you a question that's come out
Yeah.
of what you just said, and I wasn't sure if we were going to go there. but it sounds like we might. Why was the LGBTQ thing so important to you at a time? I mean, you were only what, sixth grade? I mean,
Yeah,
how and how do you know and what's going
yeah,
on and so
yeah.
yeah, go there if you don't
I don't
mind.
think at the time that I really knew in that way. I think I'd always grown up kind of being friends with the boys and not really fitting in maybe with the
Mhm.
social groups of some of
So
the
it wasn't about sex. Let's just make that
No,
very clear.
no. Yeah, I think that
There's more going
que-
on here.
yeah, I think queerness
Yeah.
is like really like an overarching way that kind of colors the way that you experience the world, and I think the way in which homosexuality has been focused on is maybe a bit of a distraction from seeing people as whole people. And so I think for me there was probably some experience of like, well, gosh, these are the activities I like, and I wind up hanging out with the boys, and I don't know, I don't really want to put lipstick on in the bathroom with the girls, that snuck their mom's makeup out of the house. And so I just knew those things weren't for me. And then really I think the pivotal moment with the LGBT protection ordinance was less about identifying myself as queer at the time, but more about how other people were treated and how other people were viewed. And I think that it was more about like, well, these, if all of us are children of God, then how are these people somehow different or worth treating differently? And so I think it was more bemusement at that than maybe a lot of self-knowledge at the time.
Sure, sure. And how's that shaped your life?
Yeah. Well, I think, in a lot of ways, then growing up into somebody that wounds up falling into that category, I think certainly you
Yeah.
you experience people who think about you in the way that my sixth grade teacher did. And I think that the thing that always strikes me is they always wind up being people that I feel sad for more than angry
Mm,
with. And I think, although there's certainly some of that, but I think that it really, to me, views like a lack of creativity and a lack of spiritual connectedness in some ways with other people or how you think about other people. And I think a lot of the times how those people feel about themselves. Um, and so I think for me, like as somebody that trains people and spends a great deal of time with a diverse crowd of people, I have clients that were born with disabilities, clients from other countries, people who have
yeah.
really vastly different experiences from me. And so I think it's really driven a desire in me to see and understand those people more deeply rather than to say, like, oh, this thing is different and therefore worth rejecting. It's like, okay, well, this is something I can be excited about and curious about, and this is a person I can listen to. And then sometimes it takes time to see people fully, or takes people time to see themselves fully. But I think that's really a large part of how I spend my time with other people
Right.
now because of that.
This is, as you know, this is what you're talking about is part of my mission.
Yeah.
And what I'm bringing voice to are those that have been unseen and those have been silenced and those have been rejected.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a broad category because it's not just
Sure.
about sexuality or one's skin color,
Hmm.
um, or one's ethnicity. That's a whole encompassing. But for purpose of this episode, um, we're talking about these people that the church has rejected,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
all in the name of, well, this is what God says is true.
Mm.
And so we think, and I can speak about this. I grew up with this. I almost became an ordained minister,
Yeah.
and I'm finding the courage to speak about it more. I've been afraid to speak about it. I've been afraid to call it out. But we
Afraid
talk
to be
about love.
rejected, right? Yeah.
What's that?
Afraid to be rejected.
We're we're all afraid to be
Yeah.
rejected. And
Yep.
but yes, I didn't want to call it out because I was afraid of being rejected.
Yeah.
I was afraid of being seen. But the core, I can't be quiet any longer
Yeah.
because the core of it is we are rejecting each other.
Yeah.
We are ultimately telling each other you don't have the right to breathe because I disagree with the way you look. I disagree with the way you live your life. And again, if you're coming from a Christian background, you're saying, well, God gives me this right because of evangelism. Well,
Yeah.
not necessarily. That is
Yeah.
not what Jesus preached. It's not what he taught. It's not what he
Yeah.
said. And yet, especially if you go to a Christian school, you see all these things about love hanging on the walls.
Yeah.
I, for the first 3 years of my schooling, I went to a Christian school.
Hmm.
Everything is about love,
Yeah.
but yet they don't practice it.
Yeah, right. I think that the starkness of contrast in that environment is maybe higher than elsewhere. And I think that was
Yes.
maybe the thing in some of that evangelical environment that I found kind of confusing, right? It's like, oh, wow, this like this Christ guy is really inspiring. Like he really,
Yes.
like sits with the broken and the least of these. And then like, how about then like, why are
Yeah.
we not doing that? I don't understand. And I think it's almost simpler for kids sometimes. Adults we get messy when we grow up, but
Yeah. Well, then what happens is the kids are hearing this from their parents. They're hearing this from the teachers, the kids that are
yep,
growing up in the church. And so then the
yep,
playground becomes a nightmare,
yes,
or the bathroom becomes an
yeah,
unsafe place,
yep,
and it creates bullying.
yep,
It creates unlove,
exactly. Unlove.
which
That's
is
a good
what
word.
you were exposed to. It's what
Yep,
I mean, even though I was still part of the church, I was
sure.
still a
Yeah,
victim at times, but I was also at times the perpetrator,
sure. I mean,
because
we all have
we can
been,
be
right?
both,
Yeah,
you know. And so it's important to be seen. And
yeah,
we all want to be seen.
hmm,
All of us, no matter who we are, no matter what we all want to be seen.
exactly.
But it starts here first.
Yeah. I think a lot of the times I think, like you mentioned, being both the perpetrator and the victim. And I think about times in my life where I've certainly also been the perpetrator. And uh, I think that I would, hopefully do that less and less and less over time. But I think that a lot of the times when that happens, it is more about a conflict within ourselves or something unresolved, right? It's like, I'm not feeling good about myself. What would make me feel good? I'll put that person down. I'll do
Yes.
something artificial to elevate. And that doesn't really cause us to reflect, right? It just causes us to, it's like, well, I can't be looking at myself as less than if I'm too busy casting this other person down. And it's like bad for those people, but it's also bad for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we're also talking about individual beliefs.
Yeah.
It's okay for you to believe what you believe, but it is not okay when you weaponize it.
Yeah, exactly.
And whether you think about it like that or not, that's the truth of what's happening, because you are ultimately shaming the person that you disagree with. Again, you're telling that person they do not have the right to breathe because you disagree with the way they live their lives because of what you believe. But again,
Yep.
it is your belief,
Yep.
no one else's. And just
100%.
because you believe that's what God said still does not make it right for you to impose it upon other people.
Mhm.
What I do with my life is none of your business. Because if we reverse that around, you don't want me infringing on in your life.
Right.
You tell me I have no right to be to judge your life, but yet that's what you're doing.
Yeah, right. It's like it's a street that goes both ways for sure.
Absolutely, it
Yeah.
does.
Yep.
And again, God does not give you that right.
Yeah.
And you're so familiar with it, and my audience is also familiar
Sure.
with the breathline sovereignty statement that I co-wrote with the
Mhm.
field. We're talking about individual sovereignty.
Yeah.
We're talking about our right to breathe, our right to be alive, and that is sacred, and that is holy. Go ahead. You look like you're
Oh,
gonna.
well, I was just gonna say, I think, and it's like mutually required, right? Like we don't, none of us
Yes,
really gets to breathe without the rest of us in some ways. Like we're not, try as we might to be like really staunchly individual organisms. I think that
yes,
a single neuron is dumb, but a bunch of neurons is conscious, and I think we don't think about ourselves that way as much as we
yeah.
probably should.
And I'm not rejecting community.
Sure. Oh, no, no, no. I didn't
I'm
think so at all. Yeah.
rejecting the what community is doing,
Yep.
imposing upon us,
Yep.
because we all think, well, community is all of us believing and doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the old the old show MASH, if you're familiar with MASH,
Of course. Yeah.
and Frank Burns, was would say, well, individuality is great as long as we're doing it together. He just completely contradicted
Yeah.
what, and I think MASH was bringing light to that. It was bringing awareness to that.
Mhm.
Like something's going on, not quite right here, and I think a lot of shows do that. And
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Well, and it's like kind of holding space for ourselves and holding space for others, and like there might be differences there, some kind of constellation,
yes,
but it's all, yeah.
and
There's
it's in our
everything.
diversity we learn how to love,
Yeah,
not in our similarities.
exactly.
Oh, but anyway, I think it's great that we brought that up. I'm glad that you did, and so. Where do you want to go from here?
Gosh.
Because there's so much to your life. I mean,
Yeah,
we
I think, well, I think something that's probably pretty pivotal would be to talk about my accident.
okay, we can do
So I
that.
think we can, yeah, I
Yeah.
can kind of give the long story less long, as much as
Okay.
possible. So, I started kind of like I mentioned earlier, I started lifting when I was 12, and that really quickly became, doing this online school for all of middle school and high school, that really quickly became a major part of my life. And that's what I do now. I work as a strength coach and martial arts instructor. And so I think just like I found a lot of joy, and like you used the word sovereignty earlier, I think I found weightlifting to be like a place where I could really experience that and experience
Mm,
that type of self-acceptance. And so, and that's something that, kind of working with people now, I hope for my clients. And so I did that for 8 years. And, growing up in Manhattan, Kansas, I wanted to do and see something different. And I'd done some farm labor. So I signed up through a program called WOOF, which is the World
yeah.
Organization of Organic Farming. And, I don't know if I didn't grow up with organic farming experience, but I was like, I was a 4-H kid. I can work on a farm. That's okay. And so I went to New Zealand and worked on a farm there with a couple named Claire and Mike that were really wonderful in the Apotiki Bay, and farmed garlic, and just had a really beautiful time and learned a lot about that. And then a friend of mine from there had tickets to their Burning Man festival, that
All
they'd
right.
gotten as part of some work, some promotional work that they'd
The
done
Burning Man Festival in New Zealand,
in
not,
New
not here
Zealand.
in the
Yeah,
States,
and
just
that's
to be
called
clear.
Kiwi Burn.
Kiwi Burn. Okay.
Yeah, and so I went to Kiwi Burn, and that's I've never been to Burning Man here. I'd never been to
Yeah.
anything like that before, and I haven't been to anything like that since. But I think in New Zealand, right, their environment is they live in a really small place, and their environment is really
Yes.
pristine, and so they're really, really they have a strong emphasis on protecting the planet where they live because they have to, and so it's a pack it in, pack it out type of thing. And I got there a day early before, kind of while they were still setting up the festival. So I helped with some of that and kind of
Oh, nice.
hitchhiked down with this other couple that knew my friend. And so they gave me a ride. And for the first night, I slept out in my sleeping bag in the field. And the second night, my friend got there with her, and then subsequently our tent that we shared. And they give you, you're assigned a little camping spot in the woods. They've
Okay.
got the sections where the camping spots go. And so we had our little assigned tent location, and we're in a row of probably 12 other tents, one on one side of us and the rest on the other. And they've had this festival in these grounds for a very long time. I think like 12 or 15 years or something, probably. I guess it's
Okay.
been 10 years since my accident, so probably 20 years now. So they'd had
Yeah.
it in the same location for a long time. Everybody packing it in, packing it out, camping in the woods. And in New Zealand, it rains kind of like once a day at some point, much like it does in, Colorado or certain parts of California. And so it had rained that day, and they've got some pretty significant temperature shifts there. And so it'd be like kind of in what we would know as the upper 90s during the day, but it would drop down to like the low 40s at night. And I don't know if kind of any of this had to do with what I'm about to tell you, but
Okay.
the first night we went to bed, and everybody else was kind of like partying and doing their thing. And I was like, man, I'm really wiped out. And
Yeah.
so we went to sleep in our tent, and we at first started sleeping with our heads at the kind of appropriate end, right? Your feet
Yeah.
towards the door
Yeah.
or whatever. And I said, hey, Shan, I feel like the blood's pulling in my head. Let's turn ourselves around. And so we turned ourselves end for end and had our heads towards the door. And this is important because in the middle
Yes.
of the night at about 3 a.m., I heard kind of a loud, what sounded to me like a gunshot or a bolt of lightning. And there's
Yeah.
there's no lightning storms there. That's not something that happens in the middle of the night like
Okay.
it does in Kansas. We have really magnificent lightning storms here that are loud. And I think being an American, I assumed that somebody had brought a gun to the festival, or that there was maybe a hunter or somebody somewhere. But I think just that sound alerted me, and so I rolled up on my side in the tent and was really immediately struck by something kind of in my upper rib cage, and I heard kind of crunching, like when you crack a joint,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
a little bit
You heard it
louder,
in your body?
and
You heard the
nothing.
crunch?
Yes,
You heard
and
the
nothing.
crunching in your body. Oh
I
my gosh.
did, and nothing hurt for maybe 60 seconds tops. Like not there's I
Sure.
wish that the adrenaline relieved pain for longer than that, but not for me. And so I kind of heard all this crunching, and I thought, gosh, that can't be good. I feel like whatever hit me really hard. And I tried to stand up and quickly realized that I was numb from my mid low back down. My right foot was completely asleep, and I couldn't move
Mm,
my legs. They were both seized completely. I don't know if you've ever kind of like broken a bone and had rapid
no.
fire muscle seizure happen around those, but the body will try to splint
That's,
itself. And
oh
so
man.
my legs were seized, and I turned to my friend Shannon and said, hey, I don't know what happened, but I think I might be paralyzed. You need to go get help. And she got up out of the tent right away, went to the medical tent. They came back, they cut my tent open, And we were in an incredibly rural area. So the Mount Doom scenes in The Lord of the Rings, they're colorized to look kind of grotesque.
Yeah.
And of course, this is actually a really beautiful landscape. But in terms of the mountain range and the type of driving that had to be done in that area,
Sure.
we were in kind of a hard to traverse part of the country. And
Correct.
so it took the local emergency services about 30 minutes to get to us. And in that time, I had, one person kind of held my hand, and Shannon stayed with me, and another person held my head. And then the rest of the festival kind of slowly trickled in to
You're
stare
right.
at the American girl that got smushed. And I'll never forget, there was this hippie fellow with big dreads, and he looked down at me and he said, "You just had a near-death experience." And I was
Yeah.
kind of thinking in the moment, like, bro, I think I'm still in it. I think I'm
Right.
having one. Like, I think it's ongoing. I don't think this is like a one and done kind of situation.
Right.
And
Right.
so they get me on the ambulance, and we have about an hour long ambulance ride to the hospital.
Oh man.
And turns out there's not a great shock system on an ambulance when you feel like a bag of rocks. And
Right.
I'd had a really strong breathwork and meditation practice for most of my kind of time
Okay.
in a high school experience. And so I spent a lot of my years, I'd work at the local coffee shop, do my homework, work out, and then do some breathwork and meditation. And I really think that in a lot of ways it saved my life on
Sure.
the ambulance. And when I was on the ambulance, they want you to be calm. And so I was, but they kept trying to give me laughing gas. They kept trying to give me nitrous. And every time the guy would put it on my face, I'd feel like I was about to fall asleep. And I don't really have like a great amount of words for this, but I think there was just some knowing that, like, if I fall asleep right now, I'm not going to wake up. Like, if I fall asleep now,
Mhm.
this is it. And so I kind of kept rejecting the laughing gas. And so they got us to the hospital, which kind of much to the frustration of the fellow on there. And they got me to the hospital, and then they just wheeled me into a room. You see these ER shows and they're like, "Okay, we need care right away." And there was none of that. This is a very
No, no, no,
small, very
no.
rural hospital.
Yeah.
And I think because I was still conscious, they didn't realize the severity of my injuries. And so they left us in a room for a little bit, and Shannon's in the hall like, "Hey, you really got to get somebody in here." And I could reach down and feel my pubic bone sticking up underneath my belly button, not through the skin, but that whole half of my pelvis
Yeah. Yeah.
twisted up much higher than it is supposed to be. And
Sure.
was in a tremendous amount of pain. So there was no pain medication on the ambulance, no pain medication in the ER.
Oh
And
my God.
so, I'm kind of like, "Shan, I'm really hurt. We gotta get somebody in here now. Like, why is it taking so much time? And
Mhm.
so a really young doctor walks in, and he was like, "Well, I heard you got bumped by a branch." And I think they maybe just thought for a moment that we were kind of like two hysterical American girls. And I said, "No, dude, a tree fell on me. Like, my pelvis is broken." And I remember he pushed on the side of my pelvis and he said, "Your pelvis isn't broken."
Oh
And
my God.
just a tremendous amount of pain. And when he pushed on my pelvis, it hurt so bad. And I remember, kind of being like, "Dude, it's broken. Like, I'm telling you for sure. Like, I can feel that my bones are broken. I can feel them grinding. I didn't feel grinding before." And, bless this nurse, Anton, this ex-military nurse, Anton, walked past the room and said, "Hey man, people don't yell like that unless they're in a lot of pain. I think you should get some type of imaging on this girl." And so
Wow.
they pulled an ultrasound machine in and realized that I had fluid up around my lungs and kidneys. And doctor immediately, kind of had this remorseful look on his face and started searching for a vein. And they got me MRI'd and said, like, "Do you want to talk to a pastor?" And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, is this
Yeah.
fixable?" Like, I'm
Right.
not trying to be given my last rites right now.
Right.
And so the surgeon came in, they start to wheel me into surgery, and I look at him and I say, like, "Hey man, like, am I going to die? Is that something that, like, is this a humane way to let me pass away? Or like, is this something you think you can fix?" And he said, Chris Cresswell was the surgeon, and he sadly passed away several years ago in a bike accident. But he said, I'm not sure, you're really banged up, but I'll do the best I can." And I woke up after a 3-hour surgery there with traction put through my right femur, and they took a foot of my intestines out, stitched my bladder up, gave me 4 blood transfusions, and then
Wow.
they put me on a plane to a major hospital. And very long story short, I had another 13-hour surgery at that hospital and a couple others. And I had 29 screws and 3 plates, 6 open pelvic fractures, and then a degloving wound from my shoulder blades down that peeled the skin, not externally, but peeled the skin from the muscle, sheared it away from the tissues underneath internally over a really large area. And so I spent almost 6 months in the hospital down there. And really, other than the pelvic stuff, the skin injury was kind of the ongoing life-threatening thing. I had a necrotic wound where the tree hit me and bruised that kind of died into the skin. And so with that necrotic wound, they were like, "If this continues up the rest of your back, like, this is too large of an area for us to graft. And if that's the case, we'll put you on palliative care." And so all of that is kind of a lot to experience at 20 in another country.
Yeah.
So I was very, very lucky to be alive and came back to Kansas and started going to school and founded Unbreakable Strength Company, and that's how I spend my time now.
Wow. And you're not paralyzed.
No,
You have no residual, you probably have minor things here and there,
little
but you have
aches and pains.
nothing incredible.
Yeah, not
And
I'm not overwhelmingly disabled by any of it anymore.
right.
Yeah,
You're able to walk on your own and run, jump, and I mean, because I see your training videos, and
yeah.
holy cow,
Full time meathead. Yeah,
you would never know that you had such an injury.
yeah. I'm really lucky
But
to be here.
I think it connects to how the name you gave your company.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I
What?
think there's some irony in it, right? Because obviously
Yeah,
I did get some literal brokenness, but I think that, as somebody who now in a training arena, spend a lot of time with people. I wound up having, and I won't really tell this whole story, but when you have that
yeah,
much hardware put in, the risk of latent infection is very high. And in
sure.
2019, I had a latent MRSA infection that caused septic arthritis in my left hip. It consumed the cartilage of my left hip. So then I had to kind of live on a cartilage-free hip for 2 years on antibiotics and had 10 surgeries and some time at KU Medical, and wound up with a total left hip replacement in March of 2021. And so I now work with a lot of people that have hardware or joint replacement, people who are maybe post-physical therapy, where PT is like, well, you can carry your groceries in and go to the bathroom. Like, what more do you want? And I think that people want more. Like, we experience the world through our bodies, and like, you are not just your body, but also experiencing pain on a chronic basis diminishes quality of life. And so for me, a big ethos
Yeah,
is to relieve as much of that as possible, or if we can't relieve pain, we can gain function. I think knowing what it feels like to feel very disabled from a really early age has kind of shaped my desire to give people their ability back. And so, like, we experience brokenness, but we don't have to think about ourselves as broken, and that's kind of where the unbreakable component comes in. So our the
right.
kind of full tagline, and I've got my little door painted with it, but is undefeated, unfinished, unbreakable, because I think that fitness is filled with all this before and after, and it's like it's all kind of a during, and when you're injured, you're during, and when you're not injured, you're during. It's all kind of an ongoing state of being. So that's kind of where that comes in.
You're really talking about your spirit.
Yes. Yeah.
You are transcending, changing the frequency of your mind
Mm.
from focusing on what's going on with the body to well, you use your words to living the life you want to live.
Yeah, I think for me it's kind of like an existentially aspirational thing to think about.
Okay.
I think I had
Yep.
6 months in a hospital bed to lay around, not able to do, I think you're in another country. My mom flew down and spent time with me. And so I had her there and my friend there. And one of my other friends actually worked for an airline and flew down to see me, which was wonderful. But other than that, you're in this foreign place
Yeah.
with foreign people that these aren't people that know you intimately or know you well. And you can't cut your hair how you want or wear your clothes. Like, none of the things that we superficially think about as identity, kind of all of that falls away. And I think even for me, as somebody that had been into training, my body was part of my identity. And I think that you're really stripped down, like, very, like, quite literally naked to, like, what am I? Like, what am I doing?
Yes.
What is the point of all of this? And I think that, like we talked about earlier, I think the point in really so many ways is connectedness with other people. And when we're in pain, it makes it hard to connect with other people. So I think for me, intercessing at that kind of level of things is why I wanted to do what I do professionally. But I think also more than that, it's like about changing how we see ourselves. I think you can see yourself as broken or you can see yourself as unbreakable, and that
Yeah.
changes how you treat yourself. And I think when you're kind to yourself in that way, you're more likely to be kind to others in that way too. I think what we expect of ourselves or others shapes who we or they become. And so I think for me, that's a large part of it.
Well, you just mentioned about being in a foreign country.
Yeah.
You don't have the same things to lean on
Yeah.
that you do at home. And I lived in Spain for 4 years, and
Yeah.
and I found a part of myself that I'd forgotten existed.
Yeah.
You know, um, there's something that happens for you, even if you don't have an injury.
Hmm.
But there's something that happens for you when you spend a certain amount of time in a foreign country,
Yes.
uh, that it just happens to your psyche.
Yes.
You see the world differently. You see yourself differently,
Yep.
and I think it creates more passion.
Absolutely,
or
yeah.
passion and
And
compassion.
compassion. Yeah, both,
You
right?
know,
Quite literally,
right.
yes, yeah.
I meant compassion, but passion came out, but it does all of that.
Yeah.
You know, you see the world differently. You see yourself how you well, you see the world how it truly is. You see yourself how it truly is. We are just shaped by the narrative of what we of should, ought, and must,
Yes.
of how we should be or how we ought to be.
Yeah.
We're conditioned.
And a lot of that's, I think we're probably kind of oblique to how much of that is like steeped into our broader culture. And then you step
Yes.
outside of your culture into another one, and
Yes.
it's like, oh, all of these things. I'm going to mispronounce his name, but there's like a philosopher fellow like Slavoj Žižek, and
Okay.
he's got this quote where he's like, even if you think you escape ideology in your dreams, like even there you are not free from ideology. And I think that
Yeah.
we sometimes think these things are like implicitly true about the world around us, that it exists, and it's like, no, this is an ideology that I've absorbed that's like acting as a filter to what I'm seeing. And then you get kind of stripped out of that, and it's like, wait, the filter's gone, what am I seeing? And I think that that's, yeah, probably a big part of
Yeah.
it for me.
You know, I love your company name, Unbreakable Strength. Even though I'm, the clients I work with, excuse me, the clients I'm working with, they're not so much, there's physical stuff going on, but it's more mental
Yeah.
because we limit ourselves and we think we're not good enough
Yeah.
or whatever, or we think we can't succeed. And I'm helping people tap in emotionally and spiritually to their unbreakable spirit,
Yeah.
if I can use your
Absolutely.
words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So and I love that. So here's our connection.
Yeah.
You're using it through the modality of fitness and strengthening
Yeah.
the body, but you're also dealing with the emotion and the mental and the spiritual aspect
Absolutely.
of it.
Yeah. And it's like they're just tools, right? We're like kind of doing the same thing, I think, and
Yes,
probably for a lot of the same reasons.
absolutely. And so what we're really talking about is being, a
Mhm.
way of being with the ones in front of us. And I want to get to that in a moment. But right before we go there, part of what has led to of what you do with your company, you also have a client base that are in the military.
Yeah.
And so you are a trained Army combat fitness
Yeah, I'm a
instructor. Did I
TSAC.
get
Yeah.
that correctly? Can you
Yes.
talk
Yeah. Yeah.
about
Yeah.
that?
The
Okay.
tactical strength and
I got
conditioning
something right from our
facilitator. Yeah, you
conversation.
got it. Oh, there's so much. You're great. Yeah. So I do a lot of military fitness test preparation with people because we're about 20 minutes from Fort Riley.
Okay. Right. So how did that evolve? What are you doing there? What's going on?
Yeah. So I don't train people directly on base. I
Okay.
A lot of those military personnel come to me.
They come to you. All right.
Yes. Yeah. So I think living really close to a base, a lot of people that are in the military at Fort Riley, some of them live on base, but a lot of them live here in this town and just kind of commute in. And, the military changed its fitness requirements some time ago. And so there was, I think the demand for feeling prepared and feeling ready. And I think just kind of like to talk about earlier, like, okay, on the one hand, there's the very matter of fact situation, which is like, this is your job and you have requirements that you have to meet. And we're just kind of like doing the thing of helping you meet that. But also, I think part of that is, like in terms of helping people see themselves, there were a lot of people that failed that test when it first came out. And then the military was like, well, you got this much time to be ready. And I think so part of that is like getting people ready is believing that they can be ready. And there's the simple tools of applying training and things like that, and anatomy and the kind of the hardware of the whole thing, but the software of the whole thing, it really was like, how do we get these people confident in their ability to perform? How do we teach them how to feel confident when they are performing? Because that's an
Yeah.
emotional state, right? Like you can be really, really fit and get super duper anxious and have a panic attack and feel like you can't breathe, and it can, make your runtime bad, right? And it's like, this
Yes.
isn't a reflection. And then there's, I think not only the fear of losing your job and kind of the hardware of security, but also the software, which is right. Like, I don't want to feel embarrassed in front of my peers. I don't want to feel embarrassed in front of my superiors and things like that. And the kind of some of the fear and shame and guilt or whatever that goes along with that. So you're addressing both of those things at the same time, and in a really siloed way, I think, with some of the military fitness test stuff.
Have you worked with those who've come back from missions?
Yes.
And so you're not only helping them put their body back together, you're helping them put back their entire being.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had a to not I won't use this person's name, but I had an
Yeah, yeah.
older military person, and so this was not TSAC prep, but I had a person that I worked with that had been in the Korean War and almost froze to death there, that had
Mm,
got a little chili training, and this was at the local campus rec center when I was a trainer there. But the training studio would get really cold when the air conditioner would come on because it was like a small room compared to the rest of the gym. So in summer it would be really chilly in there, and he caught a chill and had PTSD episode and did not know where he was.
wow.
And so we warmed him up, and I grabbed his hands and just kind of looked him in the eyes and was like, "Hey, you're here with me. We're in the training studio." And I think I've had PTSD episodes, and that's something I've done
Sure.
EMDR and things like that, and don't really have that anymore. But I've had a couple of those from my accident where it is like really hard to tell what is real and where you are, and
Yes.
so and really hard to, I think, like that panic attack feeling can feel like you are truly about to die. It's crazy how powerful our minds are, and so yeah, just grabbed his hands and sat with him and warmed him up and got some towels and things like that piled on him. And so I think that it's like you kind of can't interface. I'm sure you've read or are familiar with The Body
Hmm.
Keeps the Score. It's like you can't really
Yes.
interface with the body without interfacing with the heart and mind of a person. And so that was probably the most pronounced moment of that, where it was like, okay, this isn't really about training. I'm just going to sit with you and be with you until you feel okay. And so I think that, yeah, that's really a lot of what that time winds up being like with some of those people.
Well, you just taking us right back into what I want to talk about, and it is about being. You are literally entering that experience with your client, whether military or otherwise. You're entering their what I call their field,
Yes.
and you are being with them and breathe, and sometimes even breathing for them
Yeah.
until they can breathe for themselves again.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit more in depth, please?
Yeah.
Because you
Absolutely.
have what you have with me, and it was beautiful. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, quite literally in that moment with that person, and I've kind of done this thing with people before because this is training can be really emotional. And have you heard of the kind of like five senses exercise, or where
I don't
you're
think so.
like, tell me five things you can see. It's kind of a way to help bring people back into
Okay.
themselves. So like when somebody's having a panic attack, and this is something I've done with myself, and I think it could probably works no matter what order you do this in, but you're
Sure.
like, okay,
Sure.
I want you to tell me five things you can see. You to tell
Yeah.
me four things you can hear, three things you can smell, or four things you can touch, two things you can
Mhm.
smell, and one thing you can taste. And it doesn't really matter what those things are, but it's trying to pull people out of that kind of like head
Right.
moment and into being in their body. And it's like, okay, you can, like, you are breathing. You might feel like you can't breathe,
Mhm.
but like you are breathing. Feel the breath, feel the breath as it enters your nose or as it enters your mouth. Like, is it warm, is it cold? And so I think bringing people back into that sensory experience is a big part of that. And that's something for me as somebody with a history of panic attacks that I found really helpful too. And so I think a lot of training is kind of bringing people back into the sensorial world and feeling more connected with their bodies, because we live in a world that tries to disconnect us from them, right? We're like given, even if you don't have trauma that's pronounced in that way, it's like we're shown advertisements that tell us we should look away, or advertisements that tell us that
Yeah.
we'll be more lovable if we, like, oh, like Joe Camel cigarettes will make you cool and girls will like you or whatever. And all of these things that are insisting on selling us something in order to be ourselves. And it's like, you really don't have to do any of that. You can just be right here, and that's okay. And so I think a lot of it's encouraging people towards that space, um, just through the tool of training.
Have you ever, I mean, in asking those questions, the person has to be willing to answer them.
Yeah. Yes.
So, have you had a client that was unwilling to ask the questions or answer the questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I think training in a lot of ways is probably in like, I'm not a certified therapist. I don't wouldn't claim to be.
Yes.
But I think that, like you can go pay a therapist every week or every whatever, and you can kind of complain about the things that are bothering you and avoid being vulnerable, and avoid, they can give you homework and you can skip it. And I think sometimes people want to throw money at a thing and kind of offload it. It's like, I don't want to deal with this, but if I pay this person, then they'll deal with it. And it's like,
Yes.
a trainer can give you, like, we can give you tools, a coach can give you insights, a coach can maybe observe things about you and refrain those things back to you, or listen to you and say, like, what I'm hearing you say is this. And so in a lot of ways I think those soft social skills are really parallel to therapy.
Mm.
And I think that, you know, if a person themselves is, if they're not ready to see themselves, or maybe they haven't had an experience that's encouraged
Yeah.
them to do that, or if they find having to do that too confronting, they'll push it away. In my experience, a lot of those people, and I've had times where, you know, somebody seemed like they're really, really struggling, and I've thought, and I've just outright said, like, you know, I don't know if training is giving you the thing that you're after. And certainly, like, exercise is healthy for us no matter what. Like, it's still good to move. But, you know, like, hey, here's a resource of therapists in town, and this might, you know, be a way for you to get more
Hmm.
help with this thing that's maybe a little bit beyond what could be addressed in this environment, or I see something that
Yeah.
you're struggling with. So I think that, yeah, if a person's not willing to do the work, right, it's like, gosh, I can give you the exercise on a more fundamental level. Like, I can give you the exercises, but if you don't do the sets and reps, or you sandbag it, or you tell me you did your homework and you didn't, then you're not going to get where you want to be. And so that person has to be ready
Yes.
to do that for themselves. That's really, like, nobody can do some of that for you, but it does require work.
You can tell, I'm sure, I mean, I can tell as soon as a client comes onto the Zoom session, or you see a client walk through the door, you can tell just by looking at them
Mhm.
if they've been doing the exercises.
Yeah, and it's like it just so happens to be that we're in a physical space, and it's like, okay, well, I gave you all this stuff. We should be getting stronger. You're telling me this is what you did, but now I'm not
Yes,
seeing the evidence that we're moving
correct.
towards that. And every now and then there's like medical reasons for that or something. But if we kind of
Right.
like, this is not that. This is just like you're not doing the work. You see a lack of
Yes.
growth or a stagnation.
Yeah.
And some people will stagnate for a little bit, and you hang with them and you sit with them while they do that. And then they have a realization of like, oh, I'm stagnating and that doesn't feel good, or they realize that they're being dishonest and that doesn't feel good. You know, I think our kind of conscience or whatever can kind of is pretty informative for most of us, unless we've been trained or learned to numb it too
Yeah.
much. And so then, you know, sometimes people are like, oh God, I got to be honest, I haven't done my homework. And then that brings about a change in behavior. But that impetus to change your behavior is such an internal locus
Yes.
of control that you're kind of trying to always nudge people towards their own internal locus of control, rather than to relying on you. Like, I think to me, like, if you know, somebody comes and they're like, hey, I just want to learn how to exercise, I want to learn the movements, but I feel confident doing homework on my own, just write programming for me. We meet in person for a little bit, we give them the tools. If they feel confident to then go do that on their own with less external support, like, I've done something good. You know, like, I think it's great to have, certainly I have clients that I've worked with for many years, and I love that, and that's also a good thing. But when those clients then have to travel and they have the confidence in themselves to go do those things without me, it's like, great, that's, I've really done my job, because you don't need me. You just choose to be here, and we get to choose to work together and
Mhm.
get better over time. Um, and in coaching, that's kind of a more specific thing. But I think ultimately you're trying to equip people to be more competent for themselves, not really reliant on something
Yes.
external.
Exactly. Exactly. Which is why I also say I'm not your teacher. I'm not your guru, and I'm giving you helping you to remember the tools that already are within you, so you can do that for yourself. You don't have to
Yes.
rely on me.
Yes.
And
It should be an
also,
empowering experience.
yeah, and I quote someone, a self-help guy that I know quite often. Behavior never lies.
Yeah, right.
And we can tell as soon as the camera comes on, or as soon as you
Yep.
walk through the door,
Hmm.
we can tell immediately just by the way you are being
Yeah.
whether or not you're committed to what's going on. And it doesn't mean that we're not compassionate to what's
Yeah,
happening
it's
to
like
you
not even with
emotionally.
judgment, right? Yeah, it's more just like, well, this is something that this is a fact
Yes,
of the moment,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Because we're saying we're and this is something I say to people who are really also struggling emotionally. I'm just saying it's not that I'm unsympathetic to what you're experiencing. I'm showing you you don't have to live there.
Yes, exactly. You don't
And
have to
you
be stuck
don't
there.
have to
Yep.
make that an excuse as to why you're not being the best Annie you can be, or the best Chad you can
Yeah,
be, or
absolutely.
whatever. There
Yep.
is another way to live.
Yep.
And I've not had anything major physical happen like you have. I mean, I've had my
Sure.
own physical stuff,
Of
as
course.
you know, we've
Yeah.
talked about that, but emotionally,
Yeah.
I that is where my struggle has been. And I got to be honest, there were days there were years that it was easier to be in that emotion because I
Yep.
thought I was going to be seen. I thought that I would be validated and be loved if I stayed in my emotional pit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And the reality was it was not true.
Not true. Yeah.
I never got the love that I was wanting or
Yeah.
seeking.
Yeah.
But then there are those who stay in that emotional pit and who aren't looking for the love because they don't want to be seen.
Yep.
But deep down inside, they still really do,
They
even
do.
if
Yeah.
they do.
Yep.
So we're offering another alternative.
Yep.
It doesn't mean we're not sympathetic. In fact, we're loving you more deeply than we probably would have.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, very true. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I think people, for whatever reason, maybe it's trauma or whatever, but like, I think people get taught that there's a certain thing that they deserve and they believe that to be true about themselves. And I think you have to think about yourself as more deserving and not like in an entitled way, but
Yes.
like deserving in an open way of being something more or doing
Yeah,
something more, right? And then that's like something that you can receive from other people, but also something you can give to yourself.
absolutely. And we're able to be with you because we learned how to be with ourselves
Yeah,
first.
absolutely. Yeah.
If we didn't do it for ourselves first, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
If you didn't know how to breathe and be with yourself in that ambulance,
Hmm. Oh, I'd be dead.
you'd be dead. Something
The
inside of you
gravest
said,
consequence possible.
yeah. And
Yep.
something inside of you said, you know what? Don't give me the laughing gas. Get that mask off my face.
Yeah.
Something inside of you was saying, I need to breathe. I need to be alive because if I don't, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't have the language at the moment, something inside of you is saying, no, that's not right
It's
for
not
right
it.
now.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
the point is, you were being with yourself.
Hmm.
You were being your own comforter in that moment because no one else was
There
comforting
was
you.
nothing else to do it. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that that's a skill. And like certainly some people like myself have these like pronounced experiences, but most of us, and I would hope for most people really that they don't.
Yes.
But I think yeah, learning to sit with yourself and learning to be is a really critical part of that. And I think also, like working with people in pain, I think like a lot of people want their suffering to stop, right? People in
Yes.
chronic pain think a lot about suffering. Certainly, like I wanted my suffering to stop. And in some ways the accident was really hard. Dealing with the severely arthritic hip for 2 years before it could be replaced was almost worse because it was so prolonged. And I get like 5,000 steps in a day, maybe sleep 45 minutes, 30 minutes at a time overnight. And that was 2 years of this really brutal chronic pain situation. And I think a lot
Yes.
of people want their suffering to stop, but they don't want to be anything more. They just want the suffering to stop. And I think if you are
Yes.
going to successfully unknit all of that long term, you can't just focus on wanting the suffering to go away because you're still focusing on suffering. And when you focus on being something more, when it's more aspirational than that, then I think you're able to. Sometimes there is still suffering, but you're sitting with yourself and the
Mm.
suffering while also doing this other aspirational thing of wanting to be more.
Well, I think you nailed the truth of it on the head, which is they just want the pain to stop, whether it's emotional or physical.
Yep. I think it makes a lot of people in some ways almost like certainly, and maybe this is a content warning, but
Mm.
suicidality is something that people experience in a really active way, right? Where that's an
Yes.
ideation. I also think probably a lot of people walk around almost passively suicidal in the sense that like
Mm.
it's like you're existing, but you're not living. And that's maybe like an unoriginal thought to share. But I think that when you're pushed to the brink of almost actually dying, for me, it was like, whoa, any of that kind of passiveness was snatched out of me because it's in such a violent moment of like, you're going to die or you're going to choose to live. And then I think that like you can come about that feeling of choosing to live in probably more calm ways, but you have to choose to want more. You can't just want what's bad to stop. You have to actively desire what is good.
That is incredibly powerful what you just said. I can't remember exactly how you said it, but the suicidal living, how did you say that?
Oh, like passively suicidal, it's like a
Passively
feeling
suicidal.
you're
Yes.
drinking too much with
Yes.
your friends and you shouldn't, but
Yes.
it's bad for you, but you don't really care, or
Yes.
your body's not healthy and it's not good, but you don't really care. And I think that there's because you think that's what you deserve or you don't,
Right.
I think a lot of the world walks around in that state and it makes me I think having a near death experience in a way, right? It's
Mhm.
like people this sounds maybe I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but I'm like, you don't know what's coming for you, dude. Like that feeling, like I know that feeling I had then will arrive on me again, and hopefully I'll be more sober about it, and I'll be hopefully very old and comfortable with it at that point. But at 20, you really don't want to die.
Yes.
hopefully. And so I think that knowing like, okay, I know what it feels like to have death knocking on the door. I know that he will come back and knock again. And now I've got this space in between. And I think that
Yeah.
for people in that passive space, I'm like, dude, this thing's gonna knock on your door. Please don't spend your years and then look back and have regret. Because I, in that moment, had
Exactly.
regrets about certain things that I'd done, or certain things that I'd allowed to go on, or certain behaviors I'd engaged in. And the pain of the regret was just as bad as the pain of the physical crush injury. And so I think that, yeah, I think it's something that I like actively when you see people that won't pull themselves out of that, it like really fills me with like a deep grief, which is like a type of unexpressed love, right? Like grief is kind of
Yes.
unexpressed love. And so I think that for me, it's more
Yes.
like my mission with this as a career, or but really as a practice with other people, uh, is like how do we save as many people as possible from that? Not in like an evangelical way, but just
Right.
like, you know,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
like how do you like pull the veil off of your eyes that like, hey dude, death's gonna knock for you someday and you will not want to have lived this way, like you'll want more.
Mhm.
And so how do we do as much of that as possible with the time that we have?
Yeah. Beautiful. Now, did when you had your injury, did you have a spiritual near-death experience? I mean, you never went unconscious, but did anything ever happen like that?
Not, you know, not, I think in some of the really kind of like fantastical, you know, people are like, I
Yeah.
saw a light and I was
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
pulled
yeah,
towards a
yeah,
tunnel.
yeah, yeah.
And I didn't really have any of that. I
Okay.
am not a believer, but I did kind of pray, I guess. You know, there was just this
Sure.
feeling of, like, in a spiritual way, like the immense feeling of smallness. Like, oh, my life is
Yes.
short and I am small and I am actually reasonably, deeply powerless in a lot of ways. And so I think
Yes.
I found myself praying kind of to whatever in that moment of like, if there's anything with any kind of anything, uh, please help. Like I need help. Like I can't, this is something
Right.
I can't, like, this is like, let me make it through this, you know? And so I think, yeah, there maybe was in that way, that's kind of a spiritual crying out of like, I really don't want to die, but
Yeah.
not in the maybe kind of like magical sort of way that maybe some people express that they have.
Well, Annie, we've talked about this, and I'm gonna say it here too. You don't believe in the empire Christianity.
Yeah, right.
You
Yes.
don't believe in in what the kind of Christianity that we're seeing out there, and it's not even about belief.
Yeah.
It's about experiencing it. It's a
Yeah.
way of living, and
Yes.
that is what you're talking about. That is what
Yeah.
Jesus talked about.
Yeah.
Yeshua talked about,
Yeah.
and you because you love the words of Yeshua.
Yeah.
You have no problems
Mm-mm.
with that.
Yeah, no, just the
The
institutionalized
institutionalized,
stuff
exactly,
is not it. But yeah, I think that,
exactly.
yeah, I think in that way, it's a deeply spiritual
Yeah,
experience in that kind of way, right? Like, no, I want to be
yes,
here. I want to
yeah,
be here. I don't want to not be here, you know?
yeah. Well, Annie, if you know, you and I have not met in person, but if I know that if I ever have another issue with physical issue with my body, I'm getting on a plane and I am coming to see you.
Oh,
I
I'd be
mean,
happy to
because
have you.
uh, I mean, even if that doesn't happen, I want to get on a plane and eventually come see you. I know we will one day meet in person.
Absolutely.
Jason is a great friend to both of us, and you know, uh, there's some things off camera you have helped me with, and so you know, I'm you know, even though you're in Kansas, you know, if something you're dealing with right now, I encourage you get in touch with Annie. I mean,
Well, thank you.
she
Yeah.
is going to be a major help, and so if people do want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can visit my website,
Okay.
unbreakablestrengthco.com. And
I'm
I've
going to put
got
all your info in the notes. So, but yeah,
excellent.
yeah.
And so Unbreakable Strength Co. is my website, and I've got you know, contact page there. I've got a lot of free resources and articles and things that I've written available. I'm also on Instagram as Unbreakable Strength Co. or Annie Spence. One's you're gonna get some kids and dog pictures with one, and just professional stuff with the other, but either one's okay. And
Yes.
then I've got my phone number as on my Google page as well,
Okay.
so you're always
Yeah.
welcome to text or call that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's when you see the audience, when you if you decide to go to her page and her stuff, when you see her lifting weights, you're going to go, "Oh my God, I can't believe you went through what you went through." I mean, you just what you're able to do with your body is just amazing.
Well, thank you very
But
much.
again, it's because of your spirit.
It's good to be here. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's just a good way to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Annie, where you are in life right now, what are you learning?
I am learning the most about life through parenting. My wife and I
Okay.
have a daughter that's almost 2,
Yes, she's
and
precious.
yeah, it's the best, dude. And I think Laura and I were talking about this the other day, and I was like, I feel like, I feel genuinely competent at my job and genuinely like
Okay.
really fulfilled by training, but parenting, like loving this kid feels like the most natural. And like we're not genetically related. My wife carried, we used a donor, and
Okay.
um,
Okay.
so I'm not genetically related to my kid at all. And in some ways, there's all this nature nurture stuff. And as somebody that is only contributing nurture, even at that, it's like, oh, this feels like loving this kid and like doing like raising this person into a human feels
Mm,
like the thing that I was like I feel the most made to do. And certainly, I don't know, there's mistakes or whatever, but I think that that's the thing that's teaching me the most is watching, you're
yeah.
kind of seeing everything again through little eyes where everything is novel and everything is new. And I think also learning to be regulated. I think so many parents are emotionally unregulated, and, you've got a toddler with an amygdala that's really loud and no frontal lobe to kind of like put the brakes on that. And so I think in learning and observing her regulation, it really moderates also your own regulation. Like, oh, I have to be calm when it would be
Yeah.
easy to be angry. And so it's been, I
Sure.
think, really developmental for me too.
Wow. So is it an issue for you that she's not biologically yours?
Not at all. I like don't even think about it.
Okay. What is it for you then? Because
Uh,
a lot of people get caught up in that, and
oh,
you don't need to. But
yeah. I think just like kind of this probably kind of calls back through everything that we've talked about, but I think so much of like the world is really material, and that like gets in the way of a lot of stuff, a lot of our experience. And
yes.
so I think for me, that feels like a material fact that's just like any other material fact. Like, I don't know, we could all be taller or shorter or some other thing. And yeah, it feels like parenting is more about the immaterial for me. And so the material nature of biology feels not important.
Well, in my language, what I say is that it's the narrative or the story that creates separation.
Yeah,
And family, and in this situation, family is not about, well, in any situation, family is not about biology.
right. Well, and yeah, it's like, look how many biological families experience so much separateness.
Ex- Absolutely.
Yeah,
Family is about love.
yeah.
Everything is about love. And so when you put everything into that narrative,
Mhm.
it 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 does some
Like,
amazing
doesn't
things.
matter to me.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
matter.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
When I wasn't planning on talking about this, but if I can ask another
Sure,
question,
yeah.
what your partner, her name is Lauren, is that
Laura.
Laura, that's right. What made you and Laura decide you wanted to have a child, and how did that all come about? And
Yeah. Well, we'll have been together for 10 years in August, and Sunday will be
okay,
2 in April. And I think that for us, so, we decided to have a kiddo about year 7, I guess, although it was something we'd kind of talked about from the beginning. And I think we just felt like, gosh, we're so good at loving each other. Like, I think we're really, like a lot of couples are really unhappy. We're really happy. And
yeah,
I don't mean that as like a humble brag, but it just felt like, gosh, we've got so much love. Like, why not there's so many kids in the world that grow up with such a lack of it. It feels like a way to do something bigger than ourselves and longer lasting than ourselves, to put this into another human. I think
wow,
as in kind of a simple way,
yeah, that's
and it's
beautiful.
just so much fun.
It's
Selfishly, it's so much fun.
it's so much, yeah. Well, Annie, it's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's been a
I,
pleasure to be here.
of course, of course. And so, what I like to do with all my guests and with the audience is to just breathe, take a moment and breathe together. And do you mind
Yeah,
doing that with us
yeah,
now?
not at all.
Okay. And then I'll end it for us. So let's
Absolutely.
just take a moment. With our hands on our chest, we say, home meets us here always. And may we remember that we are all remembered, we are all loved, and we all belong. And as we open our eyes, we bring the truth of this into every moment of our lives. Annie, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chad.
Yeah. This has been a Pneuma conversation. Thank you for sharing in the breath. Together, we've remembered a little more of what it means to be human. Until next time, breathe.